Star Wars is a one-of-a-kind franchise. It spanned 43 years, 12 mainline canon theatrical releases, dozens of video games, hundreds of books, comics, and graphic novels, and even a few animated series. It's undoubtedly united an unimaginable amount of people around the world in a very unique way, as they all have their love for this cultural phenomenon in common. If you ever need any proof of this, just take a look at your average comic book convention, or even Star Wars Celebration, which is a convention dedicated entirely to Star Wars. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? However, that being the case, it's not always been paradise, so to speak. There's been considerable discourse within the fandom since the release of The Phantom Menace in 1999, and 16 years later, it would only get worse. You see, coming off the heels of the announcement that Lucasfilm in its entirety had been acquired by the Walt Disney Corporation in late 2012, a new trilogy of movies and a collection of anthology films, later to be called Star Wars Stories, was revealed shortly thereafter. That new trilogy has since been dubbed the sequel trilogy and has caused an unfathomable amount of discourse within the community. Now, I'm not here to pick a side on whether or not Disney has handled the IP well, or whether or not you're a real Star Wars fan if you enjoy The Last Jedi. I think the sequel trilogy presented a lot of things to enjoy, as well as I understand why these films have proven to be so divisive. Now, you can say whatever you want about the sequel trilogy. You could call it imaginative, fresh, unique, messy, rushed, misguided, whatever you like. However, whether you enjoy the films or not, I think it's easy to see that there's a very clear and noticeable lack of focus, planning, and direction regarding the supervision of the whole thing. And it manifests most visibly in the disjointed narrative connecting the three films together. The events don't flow well between each other, and many character traits and other plot threads are often dropped from one film to the next. This greatly affects each of the new trilogy's main characters in some sort of degree. I mean, look at Rey's lineage. She seems to be directly linked to the Skywalkers, then her parents are nobodies, then she's the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine, which kind of goes into the Skywalker thing, but only if you're acknowledging Legends lore, which we all know is no longer canon, so it's a little confusing there. Poe is a galaxy-famous pilot, and the best in the Resistance, actually. And then he's reduced to a ground-level errand boy. Finn is a Force-sensitive former stormtrooper with a guilty conscience. Then he's not, then he is, and isn't at the same time. But I think the character who was done the greatest disservice by this trend was Ben Solo, also known as Kylo Ren, and I can explain exactly why I feel that way. When he's introduced to us in Episode 7, The Force Awakens, Kylo Ren is a vindictive, ruthless killing machine for the First Order who lets nothing stand between himself and his mission. He also has a visible internal struggle with his former connection to the light side of the Force, a struggle that two separate characters try to exploit in an attempt to get him to abandon the path he's chosen, to no avail. He's also shown to be having some sort of identity crisis in relation to the Darth Vader persona that his grandfather carried, which the entire galaxy was afraid of. This is evidenced by his self-chosen image, his counsel with the remains of Vader's helmet, and his attachment to said image, which can be seen in that he hides his face from General Hux at one point and wears his mask around all of his subordinates, which leads them to obey and fear Kylo Ren, but not respect or admire Ben Solo. He crosses paths with the protagonist, Rey, in pursuit of a portion of a map to Luke Skywalker's location that she has seen and tries to extract the information from her. This scene serves as both a literal and figurative first look at Ben Solo as a character, as he removes his mask for the first time in the film, and we get a peek at what kind of person he is and what drives him. Later in the film, he commits an act which is understandably taken to be the final phase of his transition. He promptly cuts off his connection to his past and kills his father, Han Solo. He is then tasked with bringing Rey with him to complete his training with Supreme Leader Snoke, and upon seeing her potential in the Force, he offers to teach her how to properly harness her abilities and train her in the dark side before he's properly defeated. I'm not happy about it, but I won't get into it. That's not what we're here about. By the end of this movie, we have a dark side Force user who buried his inhibitions and solidified his commitment to the path he had chosen to walk. There was no visible reason to believe that he was still feeling the same confliction, or that he developed any sort of emotional connection with Rey beyond possibly being jealous of her natural talent with the Force. What we're given is the final stages of a negative change character arc. There's like absolutely no way it could be fumbled in the next film, right? Right? Is anybody gonna say right? This one's probably gonna take a second, isn't it? The first that we see of Ben in episode 8 is a confrontation between himself and Supreme Leader Snoke, where he's lambasted for failing to defeat Rey in the previous film. Snoke even goes so far as to ridicule him for his false image and trying too hard to embody the persona of his grandfather. This indictment leads to him destroying his helmet and taking point, leading an assault against the Resistance. The destruction of his mask was meant to serve as a thematic purpose, representing that he's moved on from that identity and is forging ahead as someone new. At least I'm pretty sure. Shortly after this, he moves to kill his mother, but hesitates and ultimately decides that he's unable to carry out the act. Maybe he liked his mom more than his dad, because, I don't know, maybe she cut the crusts off his peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But nothing outside of this scene ever happens to indicate that. We have no reason to believe that, so for now, considering the lack of evidence, I have no choice but to rule this as an inconsistency in the character. Now, the choice is shortly ripped from his grasp as some fodder troopers take the shot after it anyway, and then General Leia is yanked into space. But if Kylo didn't see her fly back to the Raddus, then I'm pretty sure that he thought she was dead. To his knowledge, Leia just died. But he never takes a moment to think about what happened. He never has a moment of self-reflection. It's easy to say that he could sense her, but there's also enough evidence to believe that she largely cut herself off from the Force, making sensing her a near impossibility. And on the topic of Ben reflecting on previous events, he never slows down to think about the fact that he killed his father maybe 3 days prior to the events of this film. I take this to mean that he felt no guilt over it. I'm sure that's going to remain consistent. Anyway, later on he begins to have these Force connections with Rey where they can communicate back and forth. And over the course of these communications, they begin to understand one another slightly better. Question though, why would either of them be willing to listen to the other? Rey has all reason to hate Kylo to his core, and to him, Rey's nothing more than a target. Moving on, it's then revealed that the reason Ben abandoned his Jedi teachings, burned the temple to the ground, and joined the dark side of the Force is because Luke Skywalker had a vision that he would one day turn evil and tried to take him out early. This event traumatized Ben and convinced him to change his beliefs. I want to come back to this when we talk about the next movie, so hold on to it. Rey learns this because in the space where they communicate across the Force, they're able to make physical contact, at which point they become telepathic and can see one another's deepest secrets. He confirms this by telling Rey that he saw who her parents were, which, considering what happened 2 years later, must have been a clip taken out of context. Regardless, Rey's plan to redeem Ben is a failure, as he delivers her to Snoke, only to disobey his order to kill her, and decides to betray him, killing him instead. Up until this point, these two have had one interaction in which he was scolded. So in absence of any other build-up to this moment, it comes across as Ben lashing out and having a tantrum with no clear plan as to what he wants to do now. After a very poorly choreographed fight against the Praetorian Guards who now work for him anyway, Rey wants to leave with Ben, and he decides that the better course of action is to join forces and rule the galaxy together. The one conversation they had really made him change his mind about her. Why does he ask her this? They have no history, no real connection. There's no reason for Ben to do such a jarring 180 over the course of 2 scenes involving the two of them. It comes so out of nowhere and sticks out like a sore thumb, and it makes no sense for this to happen. After this, he reveals that her parents are nobodies and that she means nothing, except to him. Ben got a heart boner for the scavenger. Isn't that nice? She rejects him, and the last time they see each other in the film, she closes the door on him, symbolically cutting off the connection that the two of them have started to build over the course of the film. By the end of this one, Ben's character has been so all over the place, it was like a season of television had been crushed into 2.5 episodes. Alas, he ends this movie with a new title as Supreme Leader, although utterly lacking any goals or aspirations, possibly heartbroken over failing to convince Rey to join him, and maybe angry that his revenge against his former Jedi Master was taken from him. But that's really it, so I guess let's see how this wraps up. actually kind of don't want to do this anymore. I'm getting depressed. Surprisingly enough, nearly every plot thread that Ben has had to this point has been dropped in its entirety. Conveniently though, Emperor Palpatine through some mysterious means is still alive, and Ben has been hunting for him ever since finding this information out. Upon their first meeting, Palpatine offers Ben the chance to rule the galaxy absolutely, with the help of his own resources, so long as he retrieves Rey and gives her to him. But then Ben decides that the best thing to do was go get his mask fixed, which I don't know where he found all the pieces because the supremacy got blown up, and I also don't know how the voice modulator still works when the thing was shattered to pieces. But I guess we're not supposed to ask questions about that sort of thing. So much for that let the past die philosophy he had in the last film. Furthermore, I don't see the narrative purpose of him fixing his mask. Is it meant to symbolize that he's returned to his old murderous, emotionally detached ways from the last time J.J. Abrams was at the helm? Maybe. There's really no evidence one way or the other, so it's the best idea I've got. Later, his first encounter with Rey in this film comes in the form of another Force Skype call, which I find interesting because it's made to seem like it's the first one they've had since The Last Jedi, which would make sense with the context that Rey shut him out. But then, why are they doing it now? What's changed in between then and now? Is what we're seeing consensual? Regardless, after chasing her to the desert planet of what's it called? Tatooine? Oh no, sorry, not Tatooine. Jakku, not Jakku. Jada, not that either. Pasaana. It's Pasaana in this one. Anyway, after chasing her there and walking towards her menacingly, he decides to let her leave because she might be sad about Chewie, I guess. If only there was some way he could immobilize her for easy capture. Anyway, later on, Ben decides to reveal to her that she's actually the granddaughter of Palpatine, which he for some reason didn't see when he saw who her parents were. He definitely didn't know, since he asked Palpatine earlier in the movie who she actually was. After this huge bombshell, he introduces a concept that his connection with her is known as a dyad in the Force. I'm not entirely sure what it means, but I think it's Jedi dialect and translates into a screenwriter's excuse for the two of them being so close. She leaves to deal with everything she's just learned, and the next time they see each other, they do battle over this Sith Pathfinder. Ben decidedly defeats her, but is distracted when Leia calls to him through the Force. Rey kills him, Leia dies, and then Rey heals him and says, "I did want to take your hand," Ben's hand, and then she leaves him. Interestingly enough, the ghost of Luke Skywalker tells Rey that Leia at one point trained as a Jedi, but abandoned that path upon finding out that at the end of her journey was her son's death. This prompted her to abandon her journey and leave it for someone else to continue. So I guess she's cool with her son's death as long as she's not the direct cause. Do I have that correct? Anyway, let's take a look back at Luke's actions in regards to what we just learned. Ben's death comes at the end of a series of events put into motion by Leia's actions. That's why she stopped training. Yet, Luke was fully prepared to ignore his sister's wishes and slaughter him in his sleep regardless. That is an utter insult to Luke as a character. Moving on. After a moment of self-reflection, Ben is greeted with a memory of his father, who, oddly enough, hasn't shaved since he died. They take a moment to acknowledge Leia's passing, at which point there is a major callback to Han's death scene from The Force Awakens. Ben's memory of Han forgives him, he throws his lightsaber into the water, and then he turns good. Where did this come from? There's been no hint of any internal conflict, no struggle, no call to the light this entire film. Now at the drop of a hat, flip of a switch, he's good again. He then goes to face Palpatine with Rey at Exegol, accomplishes nothing, and is cast out of the final battle. Rey then dies as a result of her injuries of, blocking lightning, I guess, which forces Ben to use Force healing to bring her back to life, killing him in the process. Not before sharing an out-of-place, tonally inappropriate forced kiss, of course. Which is odd because when Rey saved him from the brink of death, she sustained no major damage. At this moment, Ben fades into the Force and so does Leia, thus ending the lineage of the Skywalkers forever. But why did they fade into the Force at the exact same time? Was she using like some sort of long-form Jedi mind trick on Ben the entire final act? It might explain his sudden change of heart. But Ben ends this film with a flimsy arc, criminally low screen time, and his final words being, "Ow." I think it's blatantly clear to see that this series of films was handled with no clear end goal for all the characters that it dared to introduce. There's no convincing me that Ben was always supposed to turn back to the light at the end of the last movie. There was a complete lack of any representation that there was meant to be any struggle in the last film and the first 2/3 of this one. I suppose that in the many directorial transitions the franchise underwent in the process of making all these films, maybe a lot of notes got lost in the shuffle. I won't say whether or not the trilogy overall is good or bad. You can watch my reviews of the movies if you want. I'll link the Rise of Skywalker one at the end of the video. Now, I also don't want to give any credence to the whole objectivity is a paradox argument. However, I think that if you analyze the writing, and the writing alone, across this new trilogy of films, Kylo Ren's character arc, or lack thereof, is a shining example of the inconsistent character work and absence of understanding of the world in which the story is set. Ben acts almost purely on reflex throughout all three films, and no two of his decisions further him toward the same goal, come from the same state of mind, or maintain logical continuity. I honestly would like to see what the galaxy was like when he ruled the First Order before Palpatine came back. Too bad we didn't get to see, any of it. Anyway, call this a rant, call it an analysis, call me stupid for not liking what I paid money to go see. I just wanted to express that I felt Kylo Ren had the most potential to be a standout character. He's still my favorite that was introduced in the sequels. I should tell you what I think about the other ones. Unfortunately, he was buried under 7.5 hours worth of movie that couldn't be bothered to flesh him out in a logical, satisfying, and entertaining way. That's all for now, I guess. If you like this video and you want more, click the screen, and I'll see you soon. Also, why does he look different in each movie?